Okay, another quick video here to announce the start of a new reading project, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator by Roald Dahl. So if you've been following this channel the past week or so, you know I've been reworking my way through a lot of childhood classics because my wife has been reading them for the first time, and I've decided that I was overdue for a reread. So read Charlotte's Web last week. Just finished up Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with the review yesterday. And now moving on to Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. Now, this is another book that I'm familiar with from childhood. I don't think I ever physically read it myself, but it was definitely read to me by a teacher. My wife has been reading both of these books, and I think actually she enjoyed this one more, or at least she enjoyed the beginning of this one more. She was constantly telling me about all the funny parts in this book, and I had to admit to her, I said, you know what? I barely remember this book at all. The things I remembered from childhood is I remembered that the Great Glass Elevator was something that was set up in the previous book. I've just reread the previous book just now, but that's something I had remembered anyways. And I remembered they went up into space, and I remembered, spoilers I guess, I remembered there was a scene when they were attacked by aliens and they were re-entering Earth, and the friction of re-entering Earth's atmosphere and then the traveling quickly through the air, the friction was burning up the aliens. And that's a detail that stuck in my mind over these many years for one reason or another. I was a young kid, so I believe this was the first time I was exposed to the concept of the fact that Earth has air and space doesn't. And so when you're re-entering Earth's atmosphere, there's a friction that exists in the air that doesn't exist in space. And then also just the rather morbid's not the right word for it, huh? The rather horrifying image of these aliens getting burnt up by Earth's friction. Even though the aliens are not supposed to be sympathetic characters, there again is a little bit of a dark twist to Roald Dahl's stuff, which was different than the other childhood stuff I was being exposed to at that age. So that image also stuck with me just because it was a bit darker. And aside from that, I had to admit to my wife that I didn't really remember any of the other details of this book, which I partly attribute to the fact that this was never made into a movie. Whereas this one has been made into a couple of movies, and I saw those movies. And even though it's been years since I've seen those movies, at least for me, sometimes a scene from a movie will stick in my head more vividly over the years than a scene from a book. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. I may be admitting here that I'm not truly a bookish person, despite my efforts to get onto BookTube. But I suspect this might be true for a lot of people. You know, the visual images of a movie just imprint themselves on the memory more, perhaps. I don't know. Point being, I'm going to be re-entering this book largely as a completely new story, even though it was read to me at some point in childhood, I think in first grade or something like that. One of the things I noticed when I was reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which I had forgotten about, is that the ending of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory perfectly sets up the adventures in the glass elevator. So Charlie and Willy Wonka and Grandpa Joe go back to Charlie's house. They get all the family and all the grandparents to come into the elevator, and then they blast away in the elevator, and then that's the end of the book. And so it ends on kind of a strange note, where you almost feel like this is not the end of the book, but the end of part one. So I was thinking, this must have come out immediately afterwards. But then I went on to Wikipedia, And according to Wikipedia, and indeed according to the copyright date here, this didn't come out until 1972. So the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was 1964. So there was a good gap of 8 years there, despite the fact that the ending of this book seems to imply an immediate continuation onto this book. So there you go. Another thing I picked up in my Wikipedia research was that Roald Dahl was not happy with the 1971 adaptation of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's all in Wikipedia. I skimmed it quickly. Something about how Roald Dahl was hired to write the screenplay for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He didn't finish it on time, so they got somebody else to rewrite it or finish it up and rewrite it. Roald Dahl was not happy with the rewrites, and so Roald Dahl refused to license Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator for film production. And that's why this was never made into a movie during Roald Dahl's lifetime. Although, again, via Wikipedia, I was just on Wikipedia, and apparently they're working on a television series right now. I think, was it an animated series or something like that? It's being adapted at the moment. Although, who knows? You know these projects get announced all the time, and then half of them never come to fruition. But according to Wikipedia, we may be seeing a screen adaptation of this sometime soon. But it's never been adapted in a visual medium up until now, at least. My wife, when she was reading this, said she really enjoyed the first half, which was about their various adventures out in space, encountering various creatures. And then she said she did not enjoy the second half nearly as much. The second half was about a magic pill, which makes you either 20 years older or 20 years younger. And my wife was saying, she said, I can see where it's the kind of thing which would be really interesting for kids, but I didn't find it interesting. And I had to admit, I said, I do not remember the part about the pill at all. I mean, although who knows, it could be. Do you ever have it? I've had this a number of times when I'm rereading something, where you don't think you remember it, and then you reread it, and then you're like, wait, I do have memories of this after all. It was locked in my brain, but now that I'm rereading it, I can remember exactly where I was when the teacher first read this passage or something like that. I don't reread a lot of books from childhood, but when I do, I frequently have that. So who knows? Maybe I'll have some of that. But at the moment, I cannot remember that part about the pills at all. But my wife didn't find the second half of the book nearly as interesting as the first half of the book. We will see what my impressions are. So, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Charlotte's Web both took me a day and a half to read. I'm expecting similar with this book, although it's work has gotten a little bit busier this week, so possibly that might impact my reading speed, or at least the reading time I have. And then what my system is after I read a book, I write out the written review, and putting down all my thoughts into paper, or the computer screen as it were, putting down all my thoughts into typed words, can take me a while. It's a bit of a longer process than these YouTube videos where I just turn on the camera and blab. Writing stuff down takes me sometimes another day or so, depending on work schedules and stuff like that. And then once I have them all down on paper or computer screen, then I'll come back and film the YouTube video. So all of that is a long about way of saying that I expect I'll be back with a YouTube video on this. Today is Wednesday. Maybe by the end of the week or early next week. We'll see. But yeah, I'll be back at some point after I finished reading this book with a full review on this YouTube channel.